Evening, folks. Welcome along once again to the Irish Rally Podcast in association with Tree Rock Display Signage Brandon, our sponsors for the Tarmac Championship. We thank them for their continued support throughout the championship. This evening is going to be another interactive program. Worked very well after the Donegal International Rally, and we said, why not give it a lash again? We put up a post yesterday asking people to get in touch with us with any issues that they may like raised. A few people have got in touch, so we will be addressing those issues. A lot of them are to do with historic rallying, funnily enough. And we said, do you know what? In line with that, we better get a historic competitor on. So we're bringing back Mr. Tommy Coman, who, of course, was with us after the Rally of the Lakes. And he's going to join us in about 15 minutes' time or so. If you have any questions you want to ask during the program, you can, of course, comment under the stream. We're live here on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Just be careful with the Twitter comments. They don't come directly into the interface. Facebook and YouTube do. And as always, you can email us, irishrallypodcast@gmail.com. So, we'll bring in our guest, Anthony Nestor. How are you doing, sir?
Hello there.
And Mr. Kevin O'Riordan, COC of the Cork 20 at the weekend. How are you doing, Kevin? Thanks for joining us once more.
Good evening, lads. How are you? You're both well?
Yeah, we're not going too bad.
You're not tired, Kevin, are you?
Just a tad. Pure exhausted, actually.
Yeah, it'll take a few days, I'd say, especially with the bank holiday also.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when you find, correct me actually, I think, Kevin, you're more, both Kevins, you might be GAA people, but when the GAA win in All Ireland or something like that, when they take into Dubai or on a fancy holiday somewhere, does Munster Motor Club afford you the same privilege? You get a week in Dubai after the Cork 20 or...
Not quite, that's all I'll say, not quite.
Not quite, just a tad short of that.
Just a tad short, yeah.
But
it's a good plan. Look, it went well. It was a tough weekend. I suppose anyone who was at it and knew a bit of what's going on behind the scenes knew it was a tough weekend. But there were some great battles going on there. Like the weather turned a bit iffy on us on the Saturday evening, alright, which made things interesting on the road surfaces. But Sunday was a beautiful day, like sun shining all day, and it was great battles. Unfortunate now for a few people, obviously, like Alistair there going off and a few more like it, Colin Byrne in the national, like, was, they had to win in their grasp, and that's rallying, I suppose. Just too late into round the break battle.
3.1 seconds between Moffat and Devine going into the last couple of stages. That was a nail biter in particular. What we're going to do tonight, Kevin, before we delve into the kind of heavier stuff, is we might actually start with the class winners, because I know often on the program we end up doing it last. But why not start with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do. Well, in Class 9, we only had the one finisher, and that was Gary Lorden. So he finished 33rd overall as well. So he took Class 9. Class 11F then, there was a lot of carnage in Class 11F. Like, there was actually only two finishers in the class in the end. Jason Ryan took it from Aaron Brown. Interestingly, Aaron's engine popped about 2 weeks before the rally, so he was actually just in a standard engine for the weekend, which was a major achievement to be putting the times he was putting in. Then in Class 11R, we had Ben Walsh had a fine run in the Mark II to finish first from Bob Moran, and Eamon O'Connell, who was one of the event sponsors. Which was handy. He pipped his brother Paul for a change. There's a good battle goes on between the two of them every rally, but Paul had some problem on Sunday with the starter, I think. So actually, one person who needs a mention, I think, in Class 11R is Amy Burke, who came 5th in the class. I think that was only her second ever event. So to finish 5th in an event like that was a fair achievement. Class 12 then, we had Niall Fitzpatrick in Mark 1 escort from Raymond O'Neill. He won it there by about a minute and a half, which was a great result. Class 13, Colin Moynihan was the first Class 13 car home, but as Colin won, he got 3rd in the national award. So that would mean it would default down then to the next non-overall results. So that would be Sean Moran from Mark O'Connor and Lyre Jones in 3rd. Class 14, a similar situation. Simon Reid was the first Class 14 car home, but he actually won the national award overall, so it would default down to the next Class 14, which would be Vincent O'Shea, followed by Pascal O'Shea in the BMW. Class 15 was Thomas O'Rourke in the Evo, won it from Ian Chadwick. Again, there was only two finishers in that class, so it did a good battle there all weekend, set some great times. Class 20 was Wayne Sisson, who was over for the first time he did the rally, actually, in an Evo 10. He's a very quick driver. Class 24 was Andrew Purcell, who hadn't been out in the car, I think, in something like 3 years or something, but he was on the pace unbelievably quick, like, to get the hang of it. So he won Class 24 and came 5th overall, actually. He was 4th overall going into the last stage, but he had David Guest hot in his heels, and Andrew said he'd go for it, and lost out. Unfortunately, he spun at the junction and lost about 40 seconds, I think. So he won that from Niall Devine in another Fiesta. The Class RC2 then, obviously Josh, Callum and Marion were the top 3 overall. So David Guest won the class for RC2 from Enda O'Brien, and Darragh Reardon in his S2000. Class RC4, you had Casey J. Coleman, who had a phenomenal run. He actually finished 12th overall in an RC4 car, which is an astounding result. In fact, actually all the RC4s, you had Casey J, Jason Dixon and Ryan Caldwell all in RC4s, and they finished 12th, 15th and 19th. Like, that's serious pace from those guys. Yeah. Like 1 litre cars, like, it's phenomenal. Like, we moved on then to the historic category. In Class 17, we had Ned Flanagan, in the Lancia Fulvia, who finished first in that. Excuse me. In Class 18, in the historics, you had Neil Williams, obviously won it overall from Adrian Evans. You had Duncan Williams was the next best up in Class 18. He won the class from Padder Walsh, and Berrien Richards was third. Class 13 or 19, you had Luke McCarthy, who finished second overall in the overall historics. So that would default, Ray Breen would be the class winner in that section in the legacy. And then in the juniors, there was great battles went on there all day. Very close finish. Aaron McAvoy won the juniors, obviously, from Gary Healy and Anthony O'Driscoll. There was only 4 seconds between them at the end. But the first in the class there, as the 3 lads were overalls, would be Jamie O'Rourke in the Honda from Catherine Walsh, and Ryan McHugh, who I think is one of the. I think he's doing very well in the championship at the moment. So
I think, is he after wrapping it up?
He could have. Yeah.
He might have wrapped it up. Yeah.
He could have.
He was a guest here after Donegal, I think. Yeah.
He was out in Rally 2, so he obviously had some problem. I see there. He was a Rally 2, so he could have wrapped up the championship possibly. Yeah, so they were all the class winners. Like, there's some great battles in all the classes. Actually, and a lot of them went down to the last 2 stages, like, which is great to see. Like, but as I said, obviously some people lost out on the Sunday from various wins and leads. Like, so savage racing all weekend. To have 2 days of 230 kilometers and to go into the last stage with 3 seconds between the 2 boys was phenomenal. Like, phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask something before Anthony jumps in there? As I see,
come here. I love the race. I'm going to jump in. Well, I'm going to jump in.
And that'll be for 20 minutes, you see. So I can just go back and
I'm going to give him a giggle. You know that when you started speaking, your phone pinged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can look at it now. I was trying to save you. That was me. All right. Let's see if someone else pick up on that. Okay, Kevin, moving swiftly along.
Okay, swiftly on.
I was just going to ask in general, and obviously we've had several COCs on the podcast, right? But during the weekend, is there any part of that actually enjoyable when it's ongoing? Like,
honestly, that's a good question. Now, if you'd asked me, was I enjoying it on Saturday, I'd have gladly gone home. But then you see the way it runs on the Sunday, and it runs smoother, and like, it is a big adrenaline buzz. There's no 2 ways about it. Like, is it enjoyable? Yeah, I suppose overall, look, we wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy it. Like, but the stress levels are higher, right? Yeah, I would say over the weekend, if I had 5 hours sleep, 6 hours sleep max in the whole weekend, was as much. Like, and like Saturday, we had a lot of issues there on Saturday, obviously with various bits and pieces, and there was an accident, and there was a lot going on. We had to move stage starts, and then we had a big marshalling problem on Sunday morning, where basically I was told on the way out to the first stage of a 2-stage loop, so I was about 40 minutes off the running of the stage, we were 13 junctions short on marshals. With 13 out of 18 junctions, like, so there was a bit of frantic phone calling, and there was a few people really pulled the stops out, and they'd have to come in. Greg McCarthy being one of them, like, he really pulled the stops out to get marshals down. Like, we sat with the safety plan and just pull bodies where we could. Like, but yeah, it is. Look, you wouldn't do it if you didn't enjoy it, obviously. Like, but the workload and the pressure and the stress is huge, right? Yeah, huge. But sure, that's what we do. Someone has to do it, I suppose.
Well, do Anthony?
Yeah, how would you know I've anything to ask?
Sure, Jez, you always have something to talk about.
I know.
Never saw you quiet.
I'm interested to see how your stress level. Obviously, one of the issues actually that was highlighted. Obviously, I didn't do the event this year, but one of the events that seemed to highlight itself was the a few penalties handed out for tire warming.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I think it's a discussion that's happened many times as to. And many COCs over the years are saying, no tire warming and no tire warming. But of course, unfortunately, you have officials at one end telling you there's no tire warming, and a manufacturer telling you at the other side that it's unsafe to go in with them cold. So you're looking at your own personal safety with one hand, and you're looking at receiving penalties with the other hand. And unfortunately, your own personal safety will always win out. So you'd wonder, is it a time for mandatory tire warming zones in between the control? I know it's something we spoke about in this podcast some time back, that to have, if you avoid, I don't know, what was the length of your first stage, say 17, just pick 15 kilometers even.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think a competitor would care whether it was 13 or 15 and use the first 2 as a tire warming area with no public access, and give you 2 or 3 kilometers to warm things up in a safe environment. And
funny enough, I actually had that discussion with 2 competitors on Sunday night. We were talking about this topic, and that's what I kind of suggested as well, that maybe whatever, you have a kilometer or 2 kilometers or whatever, that you can do it safely in a closed environment, as you say. And look, we don't want to be handing penalties out to anyone, but unfortunately our hands are kind of tied with other forces, shall we say, involved. So it was, and look, sure, look, we know this goes on at every event, and it is a safety thing. I only spoke to a competitor today, actually, who, funny enough, went off because of a delay at the last stage Saturday, because we had to move the stage start and stuff due to a resident issue, and they blamed the cold tires on their off. That when they came to the first major braking zone, they just didn't have the grip. So. Yeah, it is definitely a discussion that has to be had. It was an issue now at the weekend. All right, was it a bigger issue at our weekend at the rally, or rally to weekend and other rallies? Probably not. It's just maybe some people were unfortunate to be highlighted, I suppose. But look, in general, it was just a shame, really. But it did cause a lot of organisational issues for us during the day, shall we say? All right.
Yeah, I suppose it's a bigger subject, really. But I suppose, look, we know it's probably the wrong thing to do, but what do you do? And especially, and it's more obvious, actually, would you believe, on a hot day, because on a hot day, say if you leave service with a set of hard tires, they need to be brought up to a higher operating temperature. You're probably talking, excuse me, in a perfect world, mid 40 degrees. I'd have to check the data sheets on them, but I'd say just use maybe 45 degrees centigrade to bring a tire up to temperature. And you'll only bring that up by leaning on the tire. Now, you could bring it up a lot. A lot of the tire is transferred if you're driving out to the stage, and you'll see a lot of guys braking heavy to let the brake, the temperature come out, generate the heat out through the rim and onto the tire. That's quite effective. But obviously, to lean on the front of it and by weaving over and back, that obviously generates quite an extensive heat as well.
And if you were at the start of a stage, Anthony, with cold tires and brakes and suspensions, how far into the stage would it be? That say
about 2 kilometers.
About 2K.
Well, I suppose if you look at the boys up at the sharp end, probably a little less than, if they have a good balance in the car. I know everyone will tell you that they're always trying to warm tires going out, but I think it only applies to the top kind of 20 or 30 cars. And the reason I say that is, and correct, someone is more than welcome to mail in or text in and correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're running from the midfield back, as a rule, you're going to be parked up beyond the control for 15 to 20 minutes. It's not like Northern Ireland where it runs quite efficiently time-wise. In that when you park up, especially when you come to the second stage, it's something I'm always trying to instill into drivers. When you come off the first stage in an Irish rally and you go on to the second stage and you're belting up and getting ready, I always turn around and say to them, this won't run on time. It'll run on time as per the timetable, but it won't run on time for us. So you don't need to belt up. You don't need to have your hands and helmets on getting to the second stage, because inevitably you'll be there for 5 or 6 minutes parked. So it's not as big a rush. But as you go further back the field, that delay does get a little longer. So your tires are gone cold anyway. So from people from the midfield back, the majority of them will start on cold tires. but it's the buys up at the sharper end. That's where the tire warming that is quite extensive. I would assume. I've never stood on the road section. I suppose it's an exercise sometimes to park up quietly off the side road 2 or 3 kilometres from a stage start and see what is the amount of people doing it. But certainly you need to bring the tyres up to quite a high window to get them to operate. And as I said, on a hot day, you have to do more of it because the operating temperature, the working temperature of the hard tyres, be it irrespective of brand, is a lot higher. And the only day you could safely penalise someone for tyre warming legitimately is a wet day, because I see guys tyre warming on a wet day and I just don't get that. It just that defies all the logic that I understand, certainly anyway.
But would you think if there was tyre warming zones to be put in, is it only the first section out after service you'd need to bring it in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Once you get them right, and once you come to the end of the stage and set your tyre pressures back to 2 bar or 2.1 bar, whichever is your preference, you'll normally, once you've such heat in them, you'll keep it there, and the heat cycle will come back up again quite quickly. But if you stop for 20 minutes or a half an hour because of an incident or a delay, it comes back off again. It's normally only when you come out with a new set of tyres that haven't had this heat cycle and you're trying to heat them back up from, I put it this, related like your immersion in your house. When you're away after 3 weeks holidays and you come back and put on your immersion, it could take hours and hours and hours to get it up to temperature. But if you turn it off and turn it on again in 3 hours, it heats up very quickly. So once you get the first heat cycle up, it's not near as difficult.
You've kind of residual heat in there at that point, I suppose.
Yeah, and they heat up pretty quickly. But the first run out of each, and it's only, I don't know, I believe drivers make the call on this. I know certainly when I'd be sitting with guys, I'd be advising them, even going back 20 years when tyres were different in that they didn't take as much preparation as they do nowadays. But normally about 4 kilometers, a lot of drivers, I say I will take it back to Tim McNulty back when we were together. And normally about 4 or 5 kilometres out, the preparation would start from the stage, and with about 2 kilometres to go to get a little bit more intense, and you'd have it at a nice working temperature, or as close as you could get to it before you got to the start. But nowadays, it's 2, 3, 4 kilometres out, you'll be starting your heat preparation and getting the heat built up. And we'd have little thermometers. I certainly keep one in my bag where I just open the door and point this with a little infrared thing on the tyre. And I would say, here, we need another bit of work on these, go again, because they're too cold. But sure, look, it's something that maybe in any of the commissions or councils and that it will arrive at our table eventually, because as I said, nobody wants to go through what you went through on Saturday, as I said. But
can I bring in a comment here just while we're on the topic? And we have a few comments coming in, but this from David. It's very easy to heat tyres in a few kilometres just by braking and accelerating without having to go swerving all over the road. Even a hard compound tyre heats easily without having to go mad on the road section.
Well, there's a man that knows.
Mm-hmm.
It depends what they call mad, I suppose. Yes, and I David is right. As I said, he's up at the sharp end of things, so he knows exactly what he's talking about. I don't know the extent of what went on. So I don't know. But yes, weaving. I would say weaving, yes, a little bit. But he's right. Weaving all over the road, there probably is not a whole.
I think that's where the problems were raised. Actually, the people involved obviously weren't condoning the speed, but it was the swerving and the slaloming, I suppose, they were giving out about, like, so. But look, it happened, and so be it. Like, it kind of threw a lot of pressure and stress into the Saturday. All right, like, I actually missed the middle loop of the stages because I was trying to deal with certain individuals, but as in authorities and stuff, like, so. Yeah, it was difficult, but look, we got it back running, and then of course we had the accident thrown into the middle of that as well, like, so it was all go. So
actually, just on your accident, actually, and Kevin, you can take credit for this, or not Kevin, actually. There's two Kevins, so there's Kev. I see you've Kev under yours. It's a new abbreviation. If you remember last week, we had one of our contributors, and I can't think of the guy's name. He came up with this great idea that when there's an incident, rather than everybody having to turn around and try and get back,
Brian Martin, I think it was.
Brian Martin. Well, Brian Martin's theory was put into great effect on, I think it was the stage that was ran by the Cork Motor Club in Kevin's Rally, that the stage with the accident obviously was late in the day, and the word came out that that stage wouldn't run again. So what the guys up in the Cork Motor Club and their people, they brought the man who was in the control, who's a ex-competitor actually, I think, Bob Kelly, I could be wrong, and brought the whole entourage down onto the main road, and people didn't have to turn into the stage, and they were able to get their time and continue. They didn't have to go up and do the loop and so on and so forth.
Right,
it's super efficient. I think that's
right, Bob Kelly, yeah.
Was it, yeah? So that's... So they're crediting the Irish Rally podcast with the great idea, Kev, so you can get the call for that.
We'll take it, lads. We'll take it. Well, like, in fairness...
But it proved his point that man, what did you say his name was?
I think it was Brian Martin, yeah.
Brian, yeah. Well, it proved his point, it does work. As I said, I was only picking holes in it the last day. Is it?
We actually did that back in 2011 as well for the Cork 20, the year with the night stages, and the next morning there was bad fog up in Mulliganish, and the decision was taken that the stage couldn't run. And as you know, Anthony, that when you're at the start line of Mulliganish, like there's a helicopter, you need to lift the thing and turn it around. So I actually, because I went back to the road, back into the far side of Ballymakeera, and diverting them off the Clondrohid road, like, and it just saved all that hassle, like trying to turn cars and the whole lot, like. But no, it worked well there on Saturday, because the alternative was actually you came up the road and you turned left into the stage, but the alternative was actually straight on. So it was an ideal place to do it, like. So it worked
facing the right direction and everything.
Exactly, yeah. There was no turning or anything, like just drive, stop them, give them the time and drive on, like. So
you'd wonder, is it a thing, from a clock of the courses point of view, is it a thing in event planning? Or maybe is it a thing that the safety officers should check on their initial inspection to see what is the story with turning cars? I know certainly it isn't done at the moment. I know on safety inspections it's not part of the remit. But you'd wonder, should it be part of the remit? Just have a quick look at, okay, lads, in the event of this cancelled, what's the logistical issues we're going to have with turning everybody around and the time involved?
Yeah, well, I suppose it worked well on this instance because we knew it before the cars got to the stage. Like sometimes, obviously, you're going to cancel the stage while the cars are queued up, but we actually knew it wasn't going to run before they got there, so that allowed us to divert them straight on rather than bring them up from the entrance into the SAC and stuff. So it was just the way things worked out, really.
Yeah, so a couple of points, Kevin. A couple of points, right? So, firstly, to be quite honest about it, it's nice to have COC here who's open to ideas as well. I'm not saying previous ones weren't, but like sometimes when you point things out, certain lads might take a bit of offence to it. But when it's a solution-based thing you're pointing out, like just say, for example, if something does become of having the tyre warming section, lads are open to that. That's where things work. And like the other day when you see lads taking the initiative and moving the start, you know what I mean, or the control, I should say, it's good. That's what kind of what we're here for. Sometimes I think lads have the perception of us on this podcast that all we want to do is talk about negative shit and bring things into the gutter. That's not the intentions at all. It's actually a forum to try and make things a bit better, like,
that's the only talking about me. That's all. Don't worry about
that. That's the only way you improve things is by taking on board things and applying them. And the day we stop learning and stuff like that never happened. Like.
Yeah,
there's always ways to improve things. So.
Just when we have you as well, right? And I found the tread. Well, obviously, when you see a tread, you're looking down through it and you're thinking, right, and you make your own opinion. And when it comes to it, you look at the evidence that's in front of you and make your own opinion. Like, you know what I mean? A lot of lads sometimes get kind of carried away with if someone of profile says something. Sure, we'll go with that. Make your own opinion. Like, judge it for yourself. You're big enough and bold enough. That's one thing I say. But the reason I say this in general is in terms of the location on Saturday. I can't think which stage it was on. There's a 90 left, and obviously a lot of cars were going off. And a lot of people were quite critical of the marshals. And to be honest with you, I felt a bit sorry for them, because if you get the information in its entirety, you'll figure that it's virtually impossible to get someone 100 meters down the road before a competing car comes, because it's actually not safe to do so. And it's just one of those things. I'd be just interested to get your thoughts on it, though.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I heard about that tread there today, and that there was criticisms gone, but actually there wouldn't really have been any way for those marshals to go down the road, because on the run into that, there's actually a bridge walls and stuff. So it would actually, if a marshal did run down the road, and some fella, like, it was obviously sleepy there, if he did go sideways coming into it over the bridge, there was nowhere for the marshal to go. Like, so there was no way they could go down the road safely, really, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. But Kevin, even in terms of like before a competing car comes onto the road, it didn't seem to be a place where a marshal could actually be, before a competing car even comes on, because that's something I'd be familiar with, kind of have a marshal before, where you're there and you can just take out the flag, then you don't have to run up a live stage. But
Yeah, no,
there didn't seem to be safe enough for anyone to do that.
No, because as I said, it was
No.
a bridge. It was the bridge is quite long, so like you just had the bridge wall, and then you obviously had a drop on either sides of it. So there was no place unless he stood on top of the wall and risk falling back in. There was nowhere you could put him. Like, but that junction it's a funny junction. Every time we run it, for some reason on particular days, it just becomes a nice rink. You know what is, and it's actually only a short section from quite a tight right-hander. So there was some runoffs there, right? Yeah, savage.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a couple of cars nearly collided, didn't it? Yeah.
I suppose you could make a note for the future. You could make a note for the future, just to put a think board there, or put think board or something for the road book. That this is the famous junction that they spoke about in the podcast one time.
Certainly, there was a lot of straight ons there last year as well, but it was wetter. But even in the dry this year, whatever it is, just very shiny tar, just for a very short section coming into it, like so. You might dig it up a bit for next year or something.
We've a message in as well. Now, firstly, may I say, I think the incident that we saw Saturday with the two cars colliding and the incident we saw in Down were completely different. There was a very short time frame between one car colliding with the other on Saturday, whereas in Down, there was a little bit more time, I believe. For me, and I don't want to name the lads involved in it, to be honest with you, but I felt that was kind of unfortunate more so than anything. Like, very, very little time to react in that situation, Kevin, in fairness.
Yeah, well, obviously, your man who came from behind, he was obviously catching the car in front, like, and he obviously encountered the same problem that the first guy did.
Yeah.
You can criticize and all that, but, he was obviously after catching him. If there was the 30 seconds between them still, it wouldn't have been an issue, but that's quite far into the stage, so, like, he was obviously only a few seconds behind him, and he encountered the same surface and probably couldn't avoid it, to be fair to him, like, so.
Anthony, your thoughts on that one?
I suppose the way you would look at it, no driver intentionally goes out to crash into another driver. But it opens the debate when if you look at the current tracking system, I'm not sure of the brand, or I know the company, but if you look at other tracking, or maybe the current tracking company has it, but there is a facility within other tracking suppliers called push to pass. And I think on our last podcast, Hal Lewis asked me below in the forestry in Ballyvolney, is there anything, he says, you could put on the track and like they have in Formula One that should wave a blue flag, or is there any technology out there? And I did a little bit of research on it, and there's some good videos, some of them actually showing the driver, Frank Kelly. But there's we brought it up at the Competitors Commission there recently, and Art McCarrick in the office showed us one of the videos. It's just a video off YouTube. It's there for anybody to go into, but it's the Rally Safe system. So where if in the case of this incident, that car coming from behind would hit a button, I suppose, in the perfect world, it would make the button blue. I presume it's on the co-driver's side on the tracker console. You'd hit the button to say you want to pass. You'd hit the blue button. That goes into rally control, who puts up a display on the dash of the car being caught, flashing blue, telling you there's a car behind you. And then it shows up a space that it's 500 meters, 400 meters, 300 meters. It shows it catching you in decimal form. And I think, to avoid penalties, then you have X amount of time to pull out of the way, similar to single-seater racing. And I just thought it was an ingenious idea. But I suppose it's like all ingenious ideas, it comes at a price. If my memory serves me correctly, that tracking system is just over twice the price of our current tracking system. So, where you're paying whatever, mid-40s €1 per car, well, I guess if you want to pay €100 per car per event, you can have it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's, it's like everything, it's like medicine. It might get cheaper in the future if there's a generic version. But if the technology is out there, this is the thing of the push to pass. So maybe that's the way of the future, along with virtual chicanes and all these other things. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Kevin, you've been very good with your time. Anthony, is there anything you want to ask Kevin before we do let him go? I know we have a couple of texts in and stuff that we got yesterday, but with Tommy Coman on standby, that we could probably ask those questions there as well. And Kevin could do it the rest, I'd say. But before we let him go,
of course, there's one question: are you doing COC for the Cork 20 again next year?
To be discussed.
You've already answered it. You could. All you do is pick up on the facial expression and go, "Geez, he didn't ask me that, did he?"
Jeez, that's an awful question to ask a man. We'll see.
In the first day or two, you'd be saying absolutely not, and then when you get a bit of a rest on board, you're raring to go again.
Absolutely.
We'll Kevin, a pleasure as always. Thanks for coming on again.
Well done, a super show as always. I tell you, to be fair to them, I think some clubs may not be aware, but Kevin tried out a new chicane to be able to visually see chicanes by putting up a more visible approach to them this year. So it'll be interesting to see how competitors' feedback is on that. I put a call out there to people today, and I got a lot of private messages back that you could nearly see these things from the moon compared to before. No, albeit people still hit them.
People still hit them, yeah. But to be fair, like they were a super job. And to be fair to yourself, Anthony, kind of
nothing to do with me at all. You're the first man to try them. So,
but Jesus, no, they were, and people were saying they take a long time to set up and all that. But to be fair, the crews who were setting them out, they had proper like bungee straps and everything. And geez, you'd see him, as you say, you'd see him from way back. Like fabulous job,
It does improve. It should improve. As video wasn't there just to try them myself, but it's there's a lot of private messages back to me here on them. So
the other thing we had this weekend, and it's not we didn't use it for the first time. Donegal had it as well, but in addition to Angus's timing system, we brought a guy in from the UK. That's what he does. That's his business, his living. Where there was a module fitted to the clocks to zap the time automatically. And I didn't get much opportunity to see it in operation, except at the end of the last stage when we were waiting for the cards and see the results. And I could hear Josh finish at the stop car. I could hear him passing the flying finish and stopping at the stop car. And I was maybe 100 meters up from it. And before he got to me, the times are on the system. Super fast. Obviously, it relies on good coverage or whatever now, but it's definitely it's a fantastic addition. We went to the safeguard system of having the manual system as well. We put out all the reels and the passenger controls just as a backup, but we didn't need it. And we had 0 time queries at the end of the rally.
Zero.
So,
you're not out of the woods yet, Kevin. Tommy Kamal wants to say hello. How are you?
Hello, how things?
Blinded yourself.
Tommy, how are you? Well?
There's our own internet sensation, Tommy Coman. Hello, Tommy.
Are you all well?
Yeah, they're very well.
We're all good.
No, I just asked Kev there that he keep Kevin on for a second. Just from our own point of view there, just to commend Kevin on the weekend and the event. But many people wouldn't know, but my first appearance on this podcast, the first man to ring me at 9 o'clock the following morning was Kevin O'Riordan, paying attention to what was being said in the podcast. And he just went out of his way to make sure that, that the historics were happy prior to even entering the event. And he asked what we were looking for and what we wanted. And that's a sign of a good COC, to confirm, to look out for what competitors wanted. And in fairness, Kevin, the event that went off exceptionally well for us the weekend, just to commend you and the team and the marshals around. So well done.
Fair play. Thanks for that, Tommy. Thanks for that play. Thanks for that. It's great to see
such
a good historic.
He said he's going to do it again next year, so you're okay. You didn't need to say.
No, I didn't.
The only complaint I can have about the weekend is you might turn down the temperature a small, but we were roasted the weekend.
It was hot out there, right? Yeah.
It's a good complaint.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll chat to you.
All right. Cheers.
Take it easy. How's the form, Tom?
Good now. Good. Panicked a bit here this evening. I kind of half forgot about this, and pardon the quality. I'm on the phone, and the kids are shushed in the background not to be talking.
Yeah. You have to flip that phone sideways there and see, can we get you in a different mode?
I'm upside down now, I think.
There
we go.
Now you're hurling. Yeah.
Now you're upset. Oh, no.
All right, leave it where it was. Yes.
Where it was, yeah.
Yeah. So we had obviously a couple of people getting in touch with us regarding questions, and a lot of them were historic related, actually. And one of them, I suppose, I'll get the exact reading of it here now because I have it out. But the other one is less kind of, I suppose, more straightforward, and it was about running historics at the front of the field. I know that's something we might have touched upon briefly. What's the feeling among historic competitors now? Is that a possibility, do you think, or is it something that you would be in favour of?
It's open for debate, and a lot of opinions are on it. I suppose the big one we had here the last time on the podcast was about keeping whether we'd run together or whether we'd go into the field separated. Mm-hmm. It seems that the general consensus is we're happier to be together. I don't know if anyone saw some of the photographs from the weekend there, particularly the finished photographs, but the camaraderie and the banter and the crack all weekend long in the cars that were competing. So staying together, number one, is the ideal situation. Yes, obviously we'd love to run at the start of the rally, but you'd be guaranteed that you'd have more stages and less blockages. I think up to lunchtime on Sunday, I think as percentage wise, we were still the one category that was still going with the highest amount of numbers. Obviously the attrition later on in the afternoon with heat and engines and so forth. But running at the front of the rally, yes, we'd love to. From an organisational point of view, I don't know how it would work in timing. And the reason I say that is that there's quite a large gulf in the historics in one sense. It's quite competitive, it's quite fast, but of the 19 or 20 cars the weekend, there's still, if you look at the times, there's still a gap between them. So I don't know how you would really keep them all together and not lose the running of your event itself. It's open for debate, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that kind of segues into the other question, funnily enough, that came in. And it was double barrel. It was to do with running at the front, but also it was to do with a splitting of the actual class itself. And the example used was a Pinto engine up against a BDA. Is it fair to have it all under one? And
no,
that's something I was,
not to cut across you, but no. We were the only Pinto on the rally at the weekend. And if you look at the times from particularly Sunday stages, the two faster, quicker stages, there's not a hope in the world we'd keep the boys in the BDAs, losing maybe over a minute per stage to them. You know, a 4-speed box, Pinto. There's no comparison between the two. No comparison. And when you look at the championship and you look at the way it's running, like we've had a class win in most rallies this year. We're not in it for the trophy, if truth be told. But as Philip, my driver, said to me at the weekend, what we'd love for at the end of the year when it's all wrapped up is to be seen within our own capabilities. Where do we finish up? But unfortunately, the way the categories have been run in the events, we're all being lumped in together. And effectively, it's been based on the year of manufacture. So if you turn up with a Porsche or a Mini, a Mark 1 or a Mark 2, it doesn't matter what's on the hood. It's based on the year of manufacture. Now, it was said to me, I was collecting trophies for somebody else the weekend, and they said, you have a trophy to collect? And I said, no. I said, we actually finished, I think it was 5th in the class because of being in with the BDAs. And they said, our problem is there's too many subcategories. There's actually a rally within the rally. So there's too many subcategories in the historic rally. Now, again, it's not the principle of the trophies, but you are competing against far greater power cars, and you're never going to get the better of them. So if you look at anyone that's into looking at times, you look at the times from Sunday's rally, the BDAs were just completely wiping the floor with us in the Pinto, So yeah, it needs to be looked at. It definitely needs to be looked at in terms of having fairness, and that's a big issue, to be fair.
But you'd wonder in time, and I'm only just being the devil's advocate here for a second, you'd wonder in time that, okay, let's just say you split it, and obviously there's probably 100 horsepower deficit, maybe open 100 horsepower deficit, 80 to 100 horsepower between a 2-litre Pinto and a 2-litre BDA. But if you look at that, then just say you sort it out, very similar to what was done with class, the 1600 class years ago. You had this, you had the 8 valve and the 16 valve, and then you had to split it again. They had front wheel drive and rear wheel drive. But if you ended up with the historic rally and going down the road of having all these classes split, you'd then eventually end up with the same as the main rally with like 24 different classes, and within an event that already had 24, and that could give you 48. You'd be heading on, and then you'd have the juniors. You've got 50 different classes. It'd be just bananas. I'm only just throwing it out there now. So is that what would happen eventually?
I suppose if you look at the setup the weekend, you'd 17, 18, and 19 like they run the national events. But
yes,
you might have the lads in the BDAs then might argue about the 4-wheel drive, 2-litre 4-wheel drive cars that are starting to come into the historics as well. But
yes,
as I said previously in this podcast, Declan Casey made a very valid point when we spoke about this in West Cork at one of the first rounds of the camp. He said, you approach the lads in class 12 and 13 and tell them, now you have to fight it out with the lads in class 14 for the weekend. It doesn't work. It's not fair to be, and at the end of the day, like you pay entries in and you pay entries to championships. We're just kind of looking for it to be reflected, fairly, to be seen that, yes, we don't want to be known as the best of the rest, for want of a better word. And I mean, there were other cars competing the rally the weekend, the Minis and the Lancia and so forth. Like, they're never going to stay with, never did they, or would they stay with the BDAs. But, It's just you definitely have to separate the categories to be seen fairly.
Yeah, it's like, look, it's like everything is open for debate. I don't know enough about it. But my only worry would be that you'd end up with as many classes as you had in the main field, and a lot of people would say there's too many classes in that to begin with.
The only thing is
you're right, there is
to
totally inequity between.
it's definitely the hottest rallying in the country at the moment, you know.
And it's expanding, it's growing at an exponential rate.
All the time. But the opposite to that then is that your fear is that if you don't separate out the cars properly and let everyone have their fair chance, are you shooting yourself in the foot somewhat? You know, fellas saying, sure, I've no business turning up there. I'm not going to keep up with cars that have 5-speed boxes and 100 brake horsepower extra. You know, you need to recognise the difference in the cars and the classes as well, I think.
I just read this message out to you. I can't give you the man's name unless he texts me in the next 2 minutes to tell me that it's allowed, but I know he's listening. Actually, he gives it away himself if people are smart enough to work it out. In 2008, when I first ran the historics, this is an event, COC. I first ran the historics. I ran category B, sorry, I'll read you. I do apologize, I'm making a mess of this. In 08, when I first ran the historics, I ran category B, category C, category D in their respective groups, and not mixed. At that time, Ray Cunningham was as fast as the Pintos. So he ran categories B, C, and D separately. So obviously that's not what's happening today. No,
we're all been lumped in together now.
Okay. And is that the same in the UK and Europe in general? No. Okay, so it's an Irish thing. So obviously, so in 08 it was fine, and then somebody changed it since 08.
You see, if you read the rules, something actually, when we went back and looked at this, because we were trying to get an email together collectively, we noticed that even in the national championship, the only category that doesn't have priority entries or an actual overall championship noted in the rule book is actually the historics. And signs by, if you look at historic entries in the national rounds, there's only 2 or 3, maybe 4 cars per round. Maybe if organisers maybe took a step back and championship organisers took a step back and realised there's 20 to 25 historic cars turning up at most tarmac championship rounds now, maybe it's the way to go. You know, there's a review needs to be done. I think it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, as I said, I suppose now is the time to address all these inaccuracies, or possible inaccuracies, and that while it's growing, don't stem its growth by not addressing these beforehand and restrict people.
Absolutely, and I think the other side of it is that if we address it now, I think it's only bigger it's going to get, because from the talk, you get the impression there's a lot of UK competitors looking to come over here because of the popularity in historic rallying at the moment.
Yeah, you can't refuse any entries. Every entry is valid at this stage. Yeah, it's a valid point. Yeah.
Tony O'Driscoll has been in touch. He wants the juniors thrown out in front. So competition, Tommy.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's a valid point. I mean, they could argue the same. You know, it's no different to any class in the rally looking to. Yes, obviously I'd prefer to run at the start of the rally, but I'm realistic. I can't see it happening. And I think the best option is, as I said previously, us running together with our own double O's. And the proof is in the pudding. You look like, if you had an insight into the WhatsApp group over the weekend and to help, you see, like, there was a competitor that had to change a gearbox. The competing team next door got stuck in changing the gearbox in that car, and subsequently the favour was paid back before the evening was out because there was an engine hauled out of a car and service. And it's phenomenal, the crack and the banter and the camaraderie that exists there. So thankfully we're being kept together on events.
I know if you go back in time, sorry, I'm reading messages that are coming in. Where is that hero getting it? Sorry, why is it at the hero getting it? So I have to read that again. Sorry, I'm at the losing my train of thought now. I do apologise, folks. Why is it hero getting historic injury but not in Triton rounds? Yeah, I'm at the been sent a question. I don't know what it refers to. Sorry. Carry on, folks.
I'm going to take ownership here, because Tony just goes back in touch again. He said, read the comment. Please wouldn't go astray, Tony, first of all. But I will read the comment out. The juniors should definitely run out in the front when running on their own. In most cases, they don't get a full rally with stages being lost. In fairness, they did get a full rally in the quarter 20 at the moment. They pay more than half the entry for less than half the stages in 2 days rally. You're happy to read them out, be polite. The forestry run 2-wheel drives first. They do? Yeah. The J1000s are out there. Yeah. He said thanks. No problem, Tony. Grand. Okay. Let's move on. I have a couple of other things I do want to kind of address before we finish up as well. But in general, I know you've paid tribute, Tommy, to the event, and by all accounts, it was ran fierce well. In your opinion, then, and you've got a very well, I suppose, calculated opinion. Why, in your opinion, did the entries fall down? Everything else seems to be really good about it. Like, we're hearing such great feedback.
Yeah, there was a couple of ideas about that. I suppose we'll just take it from a historic point of view. The historics was double points at the weekend, so that's why maybe there was a good strong entry, even though it's only 17 or 18 days to the final round, the Ulster, which is double points. There was other events on the country at the weekend, and I know you touched on the fact that Kevin was very honest about saying, pulling marshals left, right, and centre. Maybe it's an issue for the governing body. I know the lads pulled it to a weekend, and it's a bank holiday weekend, and the weather was exceptionally good. Quite close to the final round. If you're tied up in the championship, maybe your hand was forced to go to Cork, but a lot of the other, we'll say the main field juniors, is all double points in Ulster. So why go to Cork and do a 2-day rally for X amount of points when you can go 2 weeks later to the Ulster and get double the points for the same amount of mileage? So I don't know. It was a fantastic weekend, fantastic event. Stages were exceptional. Maybe a little bit too quick for our Pinto, but I have to say, like, the whole layout of the whole rally, and even the likes of moving the time control to the road section, when things weren't going their way, they were losing stage miles, and just a bit of forward thinking by the club. I have to say, I have to commend them on it, in fairness. But I suppose it comes down to whenever you move an event and move the date of an event, you're not going to please everybody, and it's a hard call, I suppose, and they made the call in fairness to them, but from an organisational point of view, the rally was exceptionally good the weekend. So it's just a pity it didn't get more numbers.
I just see it ties in, actually. I got an explanation back, actually, to this message that came in on the phone there. How is it that the Tarmac Championship rounds, i.e. the Corks and the so on and so forth, how do they get such a good historic field, but the national events don't? Good question. Don't know.
Good question. I'd say one of the reasons, I suppose, if you look at the makeup of the current championship, a lot of the competitors are travelling from the UK, and I suppose value for money coming for 2 days rallying, when you do the same travel and bringing crews, it's probably one of the biggest factors is the finance factor of it. They're getting 2 days rallying and 2 days recce condensed in, whereas you're coming from a national round, come Friday evening, you're recce Saturday, you rally Sunday, and you're gone back again for the same travelling money. That would be one of the big reasons, I would say. It's getting the support.
Was there, how many I don't know how many took part in Cork? Well, I think it was mid-20s. How many were from overseas?
19. I think there was 19 historic cars in Cork at the weekend, yeah. And I would say, without looking at an entry list, there was definitely 7 or 8 of those cars from the UK.
All right, so almost 50%.
Almost half. Yeah. Yeah, and even some of the Irish competitors are actually travelling from the UK to compete in the event.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I bring in a couple of comments, lads? Carl Egan's been in touch about a couple of different things. He was on about the rally safe tracking system, had the function, Anthony, about what you were saying, to warn cars when they're coming up on another car, but it comes at a cost. He also says UK forestry run historics and 1400cc and 1600s cars first seems to work well. And he's added to say 40 miles on a Friday in the Ulster for the same points as 3 days in Donegal and 2 days on the other rounds doesn't seem fair.
Mm-hmm.
40. I didn't even see the schedule for Ulster yet. So there's 40. Is that what all it is? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that from a few people.
Okay, I didn't know that now.
And Paul McMahon just add to it. Look at the forestry 0 historic cars compared to the UK.
Okay.
Say that again, Kevin. 0 cars to which?
Look at the forestry championship. 0 historic cars compared to the UK. Now, I can't say whether that's literally zero or not, but I suppose very little, if any, in comparison.
And I'd say the reason for that, and this is a very quick answer to that one. The reason there's probably no historics, or that there's greater historics in forestry in the UK, is because they don't have the tarmac rallying. And there were probably fellas that are building cars in the UK are building specifically to the forestry championship, whereas we're obviously blessed here. there's a couple of cars being used here in the Forestry Championship of historic spec, but the racing is on the tarmac here. I'd say if they had their way in the UK, there'd be a lot more tarmac rallies where they would be building to that specification. So that's probably a quick answer to that one. You're building to what's in front of you.
Yeah. One more comment from our good friend Greg McCarthy. He says, all great ideas above. All commentators are members of motor clubs to get their licenses. Come to club meetings and bring your ideas there so the ideas can be discussed and brought forward to the governing bodies if they're viable.
Yeah. Again, perfect
Yeah,
sense.
and another man to give me his due, Greg, that was on the ground at the weekend, and again after back at the podcast when I was on the first time talking about historics, another man that was very quick on the phone the following morning to discuss matters from previous rallies going forward. So in fairness, there is a lot of good ideas and a lot of forward thinking out there. It's to formulate those now and get them to the rallies committee and the governing body to nail it down before we race into 2023 and make the championship stronger again.
Mm-hmm.
Going to put you in the spot now. Normally I don't, but it's an easy one. Your views on tire warming?
Well, I have to laugh at it. Tire warming for us doesn't apply. We're too busy out of the car talking and blackguarding and joking with each other and having the crack and plans for that night. No, and you made a very valid point in that, Anthony. Yes, it does affect the top 20 or 30 cars when you're dealing with manufacturers and tire suppliers and so forth. Yeah. But yeah, we spend 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes sitting inside the controls. It is out of the cars just getting out of the cars we are to try and cool down.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I knew without even prompting you that's the way you go with the answer. I just
Yeah, and look,
I'm trying to show that it is only a certain cohort at a certain into the
absolutely
field.
And look. Yeah. From a PR point of view as well, yes, something probably has to be done in relation to it, because for the general public that watch these rally cars going up and down the main roads on the way to stages, and if you have tire warming going on, it does look awful, and it doesn't give a good impression, and we're all banded we're painted with the one brush. Then that's where the element of negative publicity comes out of the sport, So maybe designate some sort of a spot. The problem with the tire warming, then, if you designate a kilometre, 2 kilometres for tire warming, where I can see an issue arising with that would be, what about the fellow that has the misfortune of going off in the first 2 kilometres, warming tyres, and the services are gone to him at the stage start? There's probably a number of safety questions that would have to arise out of that as well.
I suppose, yeah, but then again, I suppose the counter argument to that, which is better, that the services are going into him in a closed road or they're going into him on the main road?
Absolutely.
I thought, look, it's like everything. It's a topic for discussion at a top table somewhere, that at least let's hope that this podcast has started the discussion, albeit we won't be involved in the decision in the things, but at least we might have started the conversation, started it heading in the right direction.
Yeah, Tommy, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a million again for coming on.
No bother.
We'll chat to you again soon, no doubt. And the very best luck with everything else going forward, all right?
Perfect. Thank you. Cheers, lads.
Thanks a million, Tommy. A couple of more comments. Lee Foley to talk about Marshalls we did earlier about that location in particular. Dave Berry's been in touch. Another great conversation tonight. Cheers, boys. Now, Dave had a comment after the Donegal rally in regards to the TV coverage, and I meant to call this out actually last week, but I'll call it out here now. I said, "Hi Kev, the subject is televised broadcast of rallies. After your last podcast, this was brought up, so we'll start with the fact that the world has just emerged from a pandemic where rallying it was in a hiatus, which helped some competitors prep their cars and some to save so they can do more. Plum, Gary and the rest of the RPM team revolutionised televised rallying, as before that we had to watch World of Sport on a Saturday afternoon for the whole 3.5 hours for a 10-minute clip which only showed the top 5. He suggested get Michael Bracken from On the Limit Sports on the podcast to discuss the costing for events, as looking at his post on the Facebook page they'd already done directly for Donegal. I have no problem having a chat with Mick Bracken on this podcast, by the way, on the Limit Sports. Might actually give him a shout. I might have a chat with him very, very soon. Now, looking at the past TV programs, do they not just do the event? It's also, they don't just do the event, it's also a tourist information advert. Who should be charged for this TV coverage? Well, this in my mind is part of several club, county Natation, competitors, and spectators. Club, there should be some budget for this and plan the event. I know an event is expensive, i.e., road closures, cost of closure cars, PR costs, martial hospitality, and officials, to name but a few. County economic growth, i.e., hotels, restaurants, pubs, shops, and petrol stations. The nation, tourism, and economy for the government. Competitors, yes and no. Put €30 on the entry fee, as not everyone gets TV coverage. They also need this for their sponsors. That's a little bit early for just as I'm calling it out, but I'm calling it out as I'm reading it. Spectators, well, this is controversial, but a weekend pass for €20 to give them access to service areas and special spectator areas. If there's no TV coverage in the long run, the club might lose sponsors. The title of the championship sponsors, I suppose, the event and individual stages. For the county, they lose income to business. Countries, a loss of income from tourism. And competitors, potential loss of sponsors and a need to budget to compete, so you lose them. And spectators, well, no events, no spectators. Thank you for your wonderful podcast, and I look forward to watching each one. Your friend Dave Berry from the Isle of Man. P.S. You can tell Nestor he's the dog's bollocks, as I always laugh at him. So there you go. Read out to the best of my ability, and thanks to Dave for getting in touch. IrishRallyPodcast@gmail.com if anyone wants to do so. I know we addressed it in the last episode, but
he's
conversation
right.
with Mick is probably the way to go.
You can't. I know I've a love of dogs. I have actually 2 or 3 of them nipping around me, but I must say it's the first time I've ever been called the dog's bollocks. I must say, but I've been called one half of it.
Usually the dog is left out of it.
Usually the dog is left out of it, and I'm just called the other bit on its own. He's right. You can't argue the point. I think history will judge us poorly that when we're all old and in the nursing home and we're playing our videotapes, let's call it, because they'll probably come back into fashion again. There'll be no 50th Donegal. There'll be no Cork 20, albeit, to be fair, I do know that Cork 20 were looking for coverage, TV coverage, but I think it is a long, complicated wrangle, and to be fair, I'm not going to get into it because I don't have all the facts. But I think the TV slots were all in relation to that you had to maybe put 2 or 3 events together, and Cork couldn't go alone, even though they wanted it and they were set up for it, but they couldn't have it. There was nobody able to do it. It is my understanding that there was nobody able to provide the coverage or the footage to provide the show because there wasn't the availability of slots. You had to book for 3 or 4 events, and there wasn't 3 or 4 events, let's say, on board. I think it's a pity. I think whereas the social media stuff is great and it's instant, but it's like everything, it's quite repetitive and it's very easily forgotten. I think the history of having the event to sit back and watch, albeit there's several companies out there. I see a company called Mad for Tar. I don't know the names of the people. I see Flying Finn that do lovely video shots. And they are lovely, but of course you missed, as that man says, you missed the Plum and the Gary Gillespies and the Mick Brackens and the Elaine Hayes and all the people doing the commentary. I personally, I suppose you'd have to ask a different age group maybe as well. I personally like to sit back and watch the TV program. And if you remember our podcast the last day, somebody was, I think it was you actually, mentioned, watching a car coming up Knockalla, and I just said to you, where did you see that? And you saw it on television. You weren't actually there, or you saw it on TV. So I think the memories from Facebook things at the end of stages and in service areas and that, they get forgotten quite easily, whereas the memories of TV, in your case, the last day were less than nearly 30 years. So, but then, as that chap said, and rightly so, you would need to charge, I think, I'm not sure what I said, I think he mentioned 30 quid, maybe that's what I said the last day, that every competitor would have to add 30 quid onto the entry fee, because at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for it. And that's what the problem is. The problem is who's going to pay for it. And at the moment in Irish motorsport, you have 2 revenue streams for incoming money, the competitor and the sponsor. That's it. Because we have no mechanism here, which is a pity that there isn't a working group put together to explore it, to see where could you take it. if there's only to charge a fiver going into service and supply a Lanard and a program or something, I don't know. I'd to be fair, if anyone had the cojones to try and get it up and running, I'd love to be part of a group put together to get that up and just to explore it anyway.
There's a couple of questions after Conan. Tony O'Driscoll said, sorry for the bad manners. Great show. It's grand, Tony. All is forgiven. Don't worry. Gerard Keown says, why don't Fáilte Ireland invest in advertising our great country through this big revenue generator rallying? Now, I think where I was going to add in on this was you need someone to lobby that accordingly and document it. Do you know? So then, like, you know, unless you literally dumb it down and put it professionally in front of someone, you know, I don't think it's like everything, I suppose. It's how you sell it, really. But if you look at how the story was told as well, do you know what I mean? It was like a lullaby for grown-ups, to be honest with you. Like the way it was put, it was fantastic. Brilliant, it was just a story being told. You know what I mean? A work of art, really. Like
it was. If you go back and listen to the old footage, it's and this is not taken from the current type of footage from all media. Personally, for me, Plum Tyndall and Gary Gillespie, it was like I don't know, am I using the right term in the English language? Like a crescendo. There was a build up of the drum and all the way, and then Austin McHale arrived at the corner. There was great enthusiasm. There was a build up to, you know, great enthusiasm to, you know, I have memories in my head that are going out of Vincent Bonner in Donegal, which would be one of the ones I loved when he was there against the PFWs. And everybody has their own memories of things they saw. James Cullen coming through the village in Ramelton and Plum Tyndall jumping around with excitement, you know, and narration. And all those memories are television memories. McHale, the time he went off at Will Hare's corner and went down into the shook, as they call it in Monaghan. And all those are television memories. But you can nearly, it's a bit like when the Irish football team, when George Hamilton, the very famous phrase, the time of the goalkeeper and Packy Bonner, a nation holds its breath. Every person, man, woman and child in this country knows where they were when that was said. And to a smaller degree, we can all have those same memories for all of Plum and the older. And when Motorsport Ireland bought all that footage, and they see it on from time to time there quite regularly. I think it's every week they release
Thursday,
one other footage. It's a Thursday, and like you see how professional they were in their posts. But obviously, you know, it was probably a big budget operation. It's and there was probably a lot more money back around then, and also it may not have been as expensive as it is nowadays to try and get space on TV. But yeah, maybe to have Mick Bracken on of an evening there and have a chat and see what it's all about. And I suppose like everything, let's you know, a lot of people, I suppose I'm aware of the cost because I've looked into them before, but maybe, you know, is it the subject of a program some night? Let's lay the costs of TV coverage bare on the program. I suppose there's many issues with that. I certainly another thing we might look at sometime is the Women's Commission, which is gathering great momentum in the country. I think they're having a meeting tonight. You know, we do a night on that. There's so many other things, and one thing that's close to my own heart that we're definitely, I hope, to do a thing on is insurance cover. So we won't dampen tonight with talking about that, but personal accident insurance and providing your own. That's something we need to, you know, get the message out there to say, right, lads, you need to start insuring yourselves and just, you know, have people secure, God forbid anything happens. But yeah, there's so much. Yeah, there is. I can't argue with anything from that chap and the other man. He's spot on.
Yeah.
Sure about being we'll have bollocks, but however.
We'll have that chat. Hopefully, we'll make all going well. And as I said, they are stories that are told, whether it was on Limit Sports or whether it was on RPM. The Donegal 99 was a standout for me. I actually may go back and dig out the clip, the intro at the start of that. Chicane Saltwater was the tune anyway, but the way Plum was so articulate, as something playground related. The Sprint Media boys actually did a podcast on that rally. Definitely worth checking out. Rally DNA as well, Killian Cronin. Let's give him a shout out. He's flying it there. I want to, you know, Killian's been in touch quite a bit and he's doing great work. East Coast Rallying, they've been in touch a bit as well. They're YouTubing as well. So we'll give them a bit of a shout out. The other thing I wanted to just make people aware of, behind the scenes, and it reminds me, I must give Willie Maverty a shout tomorrow, is we are doing a tribute programme to Rory Galligan as well in the coming weeks. Now, this was on the agenda over the past couple of months, and between one thing and another, mainly my fault, I haven't got around to actually putting that together, but that's going to happen over the next couple of weeks, and all going well. I still have to speak to his family and all, but we're hoping to maybe do a link where people can donate to an organisation of the family's choice, maybe. So yeah, in the next couple of weeks, just I suppose keep an eye out for that. Yeah, Anthony. Aside from that, I suppose I just want to thank you. I want to thank Kevin O'Riordan. I want to thank Tommy Coman. I think it's been a very enjoyable program. Again, we have a lot of viewers and listeners writing in via Facebook, YouTube, and indeed by email. And it's great to actually be able to provide this forum. It's very enjoyable. And to be honest with you, I learned a lot from it myself, listening to you guys that have been involved for all these years. So thanks again. Any other business before we finish up?
No, looking forward to the Ulster in 4 weeks' time. Let's rock on.
There was a couple of things, sorry. The Carlow Car Club have a forestry sprint on this Sunday. Wexford are obviously taking in entries at the moment. The Galway Summer Rally, I think, are taking in entries as well. So just to give them a shout out. And I think Wexford have a concept. If you bring a marshal, I think there's a caveat with the entry as well. I think it's favourable upon you. I don't know the exact ins and outs.
I think you get priority. I didn't look at it now, but I think you get a priority.
Yeah, that's a great concept. And another,
in fairness, sure, anything. You try anything. It's better try and fail than not try. Try something.
Yeah, Wexford, in fairness, were really putting themselves forward a couple of years back when, like, it's literally a couple of years back now, to get an event going. They were pushing very strong and were quite close to actually pulling that off. But I think the second lockdown might affect it up, but I think they were good to go. Like, so they're always good to come out with a couple of bits and bobs like that, and they're forward thinking. Anthony, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million. Appreciate your time. And just a shout out once more to treerock.ie, our sponsors for the Tarmac Championship. We're back again, obviously, in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, don't forget to give us a follow on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Irish Rally Pod. Nice bit of spam coming in. I noticed on YouTube there, so I'll have to clear that. Lovely. Until next time, lads, take care.